we should be okay. Can you hear me clearly?
Clearly, yeah.
Okay, alhamdulillah, that's very good.
And YouTube and Facebook, and just those who are following, you can just let us know that you can hear us clearly, inshallah. Go ahead, brother.
Inshallah. Okay, so let me fix my phone. All right. So, assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thanks for joining our event today. On behalf of IMY, the Imam Mahdi Youth, we hope you're all doing well. Thank you for taking time off your Saturday, joining this event. Inshallah, we all can benefit. So, as you all know from the title of our program, we will be discussing the psychology of Muharram, which is not something that we speak or hear about often. So therefore, with Arba'in approaching, this would be an appropriate time for us to discuss this in detail with an expertise of psychotherapist, Sister Berak Hussain. So Sister Berak Hussain is a Canadian Iraqi psychotherapist. I'm going to give you a brief biography about her, also known as the Muslim counselor and a passionate public speaker in Muslim mental health, social justice, Islamic issues, and poetry. She has worked locally and internationally on a variety of mental health initiatives, working tirelessly to break the stigma around the topic within the community. Berak also speaks on a variety of Islamic and psychological issues, bridging the connection and misconceptions around Islam and mental health within the Muslim communities, professional, psychological, and academic, as well as other faith and cultural audiences. Having had a successful workshop, media, and lectures tours in the UK and Australia, Sister Berak continues to break taboos around these topics to the Muslim and mainstream audiences in more events in Canadian and American cities as well. So without further ado, let's give the floor to Sister Berak and welcome her with a salawat so we can start our program today. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much for the warm welcome, brother. Welcome to our audiences. Thank you for bearing with us for a few minutes while we got the technicalities all up and going. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In his name I begin. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Alhamdulillah, this year we're very blessed, despite the challenges that we had, to have a very meaningful Muharram. And I think this year with the pandemic issue, it truly caused us to look at how we wanted to express our love for Imam Hussain through creative ways of doing the majalis in a way we never thought that we would have to in our lifetime, subhanAllah. Yet we were blessed with that, and we got the opportunity to have majalis and Hussainiyas in our houses everywhere around the world, where we were opening up our computers, our TVs, anywhere really where we got the chance to connect to speakers from around the globe with so many different topics that impacted us on so many different levels. This year, personally, as a majlis goer and also as somebody who is very passionate about what I do in my line of work as a psychotherapist and a mental health advocate, I was thinking, what can I do to contribute in the name of Imam Hussain alayhi salam? And that was really important to me to be part of that, as I felt very passionate about it. And I wanted to serve in some way or another, because we're used to serving in our Hussainiyas and majalis. So this year was quite different, of course. And so this idea came to me out of nowhere. And I guess this is the inspiration of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. Well, we say it's out of nowhere, but it's truly through them, to talk about the different aspects, different personalities and characteristics that are embodied in what Ashura and Muharram teaches us, but through this angle of my line of work, through psychology, well-being, and mental health. And alhamdulillah, with shukr, this project, I think, successfully completed itself with a lot of support and love from family and friends around the globe. Mm-hmm. But also the love that's in our hearts for the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam and what Imam Hussain stood for, because he inspires us so many different ways. And that's what we want to grow and learn from this. Sure, you can go to the majlis and do latam, you can cry there and then you take the barakah and leave, and then you're done for the 10 or 13 days until Arba'in, and then the next year, then what, right? Then you go about your life as a zombie. It has no meaning that way. Whereas you can work on connecting to the lessons, the school, the lifestyle of what a Hussaini embodies in terms of not just following, but truly loving and embodying what you learn daily in your life. This is what it's all about. And I hope through the series that I did that it was able to impact people. For those of you who haven't seen the series, it is on the Muslim Counselor YouTube page. It's also on Facebook. And you can listen to it, where it was looked at from the angle of, again, psychology and research and how to apply these concepts in our lives, but through the different characters that we were honoring during the nights of Muharram. For our discussion today, inshallah, we're going to take a closer look and have a Q&A back and forth. And you're welcome, as audiences who are watching on Facebook and YouTube, to please also send in your questions and we will try to answer them. But we're going to take a closer look at what courage is, what altruism is, and how they connect, and how to apply that in our lives, whether it's from a spiritual point of view, whether it is from a personal point of view, and essentially how to apply it daily, whether it's social justice, whether it's through the creative arts, whether it's spiritually, religiously. In the end, it's all about standing up against injustice through our own understanding and whatnot. So we're going to focus on it from the psychological, mental health, well-being point of view, obviously using Islamic concepts that we understand. And inshallah, we'll do our best to do that. And of course, quickly, when we do talk about courage and altruism, of course, who comes to mind other than Abu Fadl al-Abbas? So in his honor, I've got my Abu Fadl al-Abbas mug that I got from Karbala. And have that. And we have Chai Abu Ali. We're not there in Ziyarah this year, but inshallah we'll try to do that. Now, another thing we'd like to mention, and I have to personally say this, is this has been a very difficult time for a lot of us who have not been able to go to Ziyarat al-Arba'in because of the pandemic and because of the dangers and anything surrounding that. And it's truly... it's been very hard. I think I just now cleared my sinuses from how much I have been crying the last 2 days, because it personally just hit me that we're not going. There was a sense of denial the last few weeks leading up to this Thursday coming up, a sense of denial, yet it hit me yesterday when my friend called me when they were doing the walk, and they video called me, and I just started bawling. And I think it doesn't matter if you're male or female, grown men are impacted by this and are crying and weeping. You have people on the borders of Kuwait and Iran surrounding Iraq who are crying at the border begging to be coming in. And I think this is something we need to talk about. Earlier today, like I was saying, it just hit me as to one of the reasons why I'm supposed to stay here. I think Egypt, I don't want to get too much into it now, but part of our discussion at the end, inshallah, today will be exploring how to cope with this grief of not going, how to deal with it mentally, spiritually, and what we can learn and benefit from it, inshallah.
Inshallah. Thank you, sister, for a brief introduction to our event today. So to get started, we have, and also as sister mentioned, please, if you have any questions, you can comment them here on our live here or on Facebook or other platforms we're currently live on. So we have some questions to start our discussion today with, and we're going to go from here. And if you have questions, please ask. So we would start with asking, given the concept of altruism, even for us, the followers of Ahlul Bayt, who aren't infallible, of course, would you say or advise us that our acts of help, even if it does come at a cost of sacrifice, whether it's big or small, is more so motivated by our innate selfish desire to be heroic than courageous, or is it otherwise in terms of psychological aspect of it?
So it's a very good and interesting question, and I think we need to divide it down and break it down into a few parts here. So first, let's have a better understanding. What is altruism, right? What is that, and what is courage? And how we can take a look at how we're motivated, if it's selfish or desire to be heroic, or is it truly about courage? So let's explore that. So altruism, okay, when you hear that, what comes to mind? Usually it's the act to help others at the cost of oneself. And it could be something simple. Could be like holding the door for somebody, and the sacrifice there is you're waiting, right? It could be something simple like
Yeah.
that. It could be giving charity. It could be volunteering. And it could be the other end of it, which is sacrificing your life to save others, right? So people behave this way when they see there's a challenge or a danger to others, and they feel empathy. That something in them is driving them to help.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, it can be both selfless, or it could be and selfish, because as giving to others it feels good. All right, it's a motivator. So that warm glow, that warm feeling that you get of helping others, that in itself can reinforce that behavior again. So in psychology, when something gives you a good feeling, you are more likely to do it again. If you notice, for example, in our majalis and just the act of giving in our communities and how the Ahlul Bayt reinforce that, you feel good when you do it, you're more motivated to do it again, right? Now, altruism, that can also be an innate reaction to when we see others in danger. And we act upon what? Compassionate grounds when we see other people in pain or in danger. So we can even see this in animals. If you just look at the animal kingdom and how a mama bear, you know, or how she jumps out to protect her cubs, and she could be at the end of an attack from another creature or animal, right? So she's there to save those who could be in danger. So the question then comes down to how much would you do or would you give to yourself, of yourself to others to help, right? And when we take a look at it from the psychological research aspect, this can depend on a few things, right? Which we're going to explore a little bit further. But like we said, it could be something from a simple matter to something that is really big. And for the most part, you have people who are in the middle, right? You have the simple things, but then you have the extreme cases where people can be considered heartless psychopaths. They're on the low end of the spectrum, where they're not impacted. They're not impacted by seeing somebody in danger or in pain. They're not going to act like that. We tend to be in the middle. So when we look at courage in this case, it can be the act of helping others in danger of distress in that split second. Okay, then doing that split decision of facing your own fear at the risk of endangering yourself, that something's more important than that fear. So facing your fear, more important than something than that fear to do that. So courage essentially is seeing beyond fear to do what needs to be done. So in this case, when we come back, so now that we have that better understanding, and I like to answer this question with the example that I learned from my university professor in first year philosophy, where they talked about, and I always imagine, I'm picturing him right now in my head when the image comes, where it is, you see somebody in a pool of water or in a stream somewhere, and you know, what do? Do you jump in to help them? Do you go in to help them because it's going to make you feel good to help them, right? Or is it because you truly are acting upon sacrificing yourself to help somebody in danger? So I can't answer that in terms of, is it motivated by our selfish innate desire to be heroic, or is it part of our courage? There's not, a right or wrong answer here to answer this. I think it's very personal, because as we go through the other questions, you're going to see there's a build up to it to be able to answer this question. There's so many influences around that to help you make that split decision, because it could be an influence of your upbringing, your beliefs, your religion or culture or whatever, that will help you decide in that moment to help somebody or not. Some of us could be more selfish than others, absolutely. And some of us, as we look at the example of Abu Fadl al-Abbas, he did not have any fear. He selflessly put aside his fear to go and get water to help the thirsty children. And he was there with his courage to protect them and help them until his dying breath. And you see in the end, in the story, that we hear over and over again, all he was thinking about was his master, whom he called finally his brother by his name at the end, where he was fearful for him, what's going to happen to him after, who's going to be there to put him on his head. So when we look at this, how can we apply this to our daily lives? Does it mean that you act blindly and fearlessly to do something that's good and it's going to help other people? Do we put things into consideration, or is it that we want to do this to be known? Like, did Abu Fadl Abbas actually do this because he wanted to be known? Of course not. We know that. But then to answer that question, then we need to put things into perspective that way. How do you choose to act upon this, right? And again, psychologically, we'll look for, and I don't want to jump ahead to the next question, the answers to the next question, but there are a variety of different factors that can influence you in terms of acting selfishly, it's hard to say that, or selflessly, which is where the courage comes in.
Of course, yeah. We also agree that there's factors involved in decision making when it comes to that. So as we dig into more questions, I think that would become more clear for the audience too. So next question we have, that as a Muslim youth in Western society, we are constantly under attack for simply just practicing our religion. That we see it every day, with even videos of it surfacing around on the internet. So which is our basic human right. So what can we learn from the notion of altruism and courage, especially when combining them up with the story of the Ahlul Bayt in a society where we're constantly under attack from people that we see every day?
So this is also a very interesting question in terms of what can we learn from altruism and courage when we combine it with the story of the Ahlul Bayt, right? When we are constantly under attack. So again, when it comes down to the essence, like when I look at the lessons of what the Ahlul Bayt exemplified during Muharram, and especially on Ashura, it is about standing up for your rights, standing up against oppression and tyranny. And we use these words all the time, almost like catchwords and very loosely. And I think we really need to go and dig deeper, which is what this whole season is of Muharram and Safar, and learning and really digging deep in terms of how to answer such a question like that. And I want to look at it specifically from a mental health aspect, because I can go off topic here and talk about it from a social justice aspect. I can talk about it from my own opinions. I can talk about it from what I learned about Islam. But I want to talk about it specifically from how does this type of oppression impact us? And why, when we understand how it can impact you mentally, why we need to stand up for it. Why, how can we learn from all of this courage when we understand how it impacts you? So let's take a look at that. When we take a look at how oppression can impact you, it does impact you. It leads to depression and anxiety. And when we look at a type of oppression, let's say racism, for example, right? We see that this is a symptom of psychological ill health. It's a lack of psychological integration, a lack of self-esteem and inner security, because we know that healthy people have a sense of self and a strong inner security, right? They're not going to behave in such a way. They don't feel the need to strengthen their sense of self through their group identity, right? They have no need to define themselves in distinction to and in conflict with others. They are at peace with themselves, right? And so people who have the need to oppress, right? When we understand this, then we can answer this a little bit better. They are obsessed with trying to fill that inner security, right? That sense of lacking. What do? They probably take drugs, drinking heavily, arrogance, like somebody mentioned there. Yes. Becoming obsessively materialistic or ambitious. These could be other responses, right? So we know that psychologically healthy people don't need to resort to this type of oppression in the same way they don't need to turn to drugs or other influences to help them deal with that, right? When we go deeper in terms of what psychological research has shown, we see that there is a significant effect on both our physical and mental health when it comes to these types of things, right? There's anxiety, anger, sadness. This arises from as an understandable reaction when we experience that type of oppression, right? So there becomes a lack of control, where these experiences, they can elicit this understanding or perception of lack of control of our environment. How many times have you felt very helpless when you see a form of injustice that's happening? For example, the people in Pakistan, where we see there's a call for Shia genocide. Do you not feel an outrage? But there's also a lack of control other than feeling outrage. So you want to look at what can you do to minimize that control. Perhaps from our end of the world, do a lot of the world just slipped my mind. Astaghfirullah, it just slipped my mind, but rallying, right? A lot of rallying and working with politicians and bringing attention to it that way, right? Now, if we go further in terms of how this oppression can impact you, you look at internalization. So this is also related to racism as well, right? And we take a look at how this type of internalization, especially by marginalized groups. So in this case, Muslims who are living in the West could be identified here as a marginalized group, right? We start looking at ourselves perhaps in a negative way. We start being very critical of ourselves, about our worth. If you look at women who wear the hijab, for example, in public, they are somewhat representative of Islam because of what they're wearing. Some people call us the flag bearers or the banners, right? But you're also a symbol of Islam when you're out there with proper hijab, not fashion hijab, which I ridicule a lot, but proper modest hijab out in public, right? So when you take a look at that, then perhaps people start feeling that they're worth less. They don't have a proper worth here, right? They don't feel perhaps as women with hijab as because it's this constant rhetoric of us being oppressed because of the fact that we wear the hijab, where we're supposed to listen to men and men are oppressing us, right? So over time, people can buy into that and actually believe that. So this is a form of internalization, which impacts your self-esteem and causes a lot of psychological distress, right? Now, further to this research, when we look at clinical research, it takes a look at how these critical beliefs of oneself and negative self-focused thoughts, these are associated with development and maintenance of anxiety and symptoms of negative beliefs over time. It continues. This can impact you long term. So helplessness, like we said, worthlessness, sadness, fear, and shame. Then we can, if we apply again this further, you look at avoidance. There is an avoidance of valued action for people who are oppressed. And this is what the research shows, for example, with people who are Black Americans specifically, who are experiencing racism. And then we can apply this concept, let's say, to Muslims who are marginalized groups, right? So how does this avoidance, for example, you are not going to be taking action for the things that you believe in and that you want because of how you want to avoid a negative experience, right? Positive emotions with positive experiences are going to motivate you. Again, when we talked about doing good earlier, right? But then avoidance of action. So when people who are oppressed or living in fear, you are going to avoid things that are going to make you feel this way. It's common sense, and the research shows that, right? An interesting aspect to that is the underlying assumption that we have to suppress, we have to get rid of these negative emotions, we have to come out with confidence and self-esteem and show that we're optimistic in order to move through life, right? And find meaningfulness. So this is something that we're supposed to be feeling. But again, what research shows, okay, that these contradictory effects of attempts to control our emotions and experiences, such as showing avoidant coping and pushing our feelings aside and pretending that these experiences did not impact us, what happens here is that it's going to impact us long term. So brother, I think you got kicked out of the studio. If you just want to get back into the studio, I'll continue talking while you get back in. All right, so here what we need to understand as people who, let's say, are being marginalized or oppressed, you cannot necessarily just ignore these emotions and just suppress them, because it will come back to haunt you. It will come back to hurt you. I can tell you, not just from research, but clinically with clients that I work with, for those people who push aside how they feel, because they say, you know, I'm a guy, I can't show emotions, I have to tough it up, for example. Or people go through difficult situations and they just kind of push it aside, suppress it. It comes back to hurt them. They come into therapy and say, I don't know why I'm feeling so anxious or depressed. And then when you go through their history of what happened to them, it could be because they've suppressed a lot of negative emotions related to anything in their life. But specifically, we're talking about here, let's say, the youth who are putting aside suppressing their emotions when it comes to being Muslims in a society here where you're supposed to show who you are and what you are. So it's really important to recognize. So how do we work with that? We need to validate and recognize these emotions. When you give that validation, that anxiety, when you normalize and say it's normal to feel this way, you're being very compassionate. And that's one of the tools as well, is to show compassion and love to yourself and to others. So you see how you help your mental health and well-being here is we need to acknowledge when you are going through a difficult time. That's why talking to somebody's it helps. Talking to God helps. Helping yourself through du'as, or using the beautiful du'as of Sahifa Sajjadiyah, where there are specific du'as on worry and oppression and whatnot that can help lift your emotions. Of course, talking to a therapist as well can really help you work through these challenges, right? Because you are working through and normalizing these difficult situations. So now that we have a better understanding of that, let's tie that back in to understanding here. The question is, as youth living in the West and the people who are living in this part of the world, when it comes to this concept here of altruism and courage, now that you have an understanding of how oppression can impact you, now you have a better understanding of how to stand up for yourself, for the oppressed, because we see how oppression affects you. This is what the whole essence of the many lessons that we learn from Imam Hussein's is, to not live in humility, to stand up with dignity against the oppression, because we know what oppression does from a mental health aspect. We know what we've seen in history leading up to what Imam Hussain had done, is the corruption that people were living under and the tyranny, and how our religion was losing itself in the face of a fake Islam, as I would call it that time. So these people that were living in fear of expressing who they were and what they truly believed, they were supposed to just cast that aside and go along in their business like nothing happened. We see how it impacts people. So imagine what it did to the people back then, leading up to what Imam Hussain did, his revolution with his sacrifice of his blood. It awakened that consciousness of people. It lifted them. Do you not feel that in your heart when you read about the story, when you are dying to go to Arba'in, right? You want to say Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah in person, because you acknowledge, just like it says in Ziyarat Ashura, you acknowledge what he stood for. This is the essence right there, right? Again, this is how you can learn from that, because we know how oppression can impact us mentally. Because we know that, it does require us to apply that courage to stand up. I hope that answered the question.
Very nicely together. So continuing with the questions, I'm seeing there are some questions we can attend to them later as we go on. But with the next questions that we have prepared is, if an act of help takes courage, however, the intent may not be 100% altruistic, do you advise someone to proceed in this manner of helping others, or to step back and reevaluate themselves before taking an action?
So this is a very interesting question as well. When we take a look at, if somebody is helping others based on a negative intention, we can link that back to our own faith when it comes to the principles of intention, right? Because we are taught that our niyyah, our intention behind our actions, account for a lot in our faith, right? So when we take that intention, you ask yourself, are you doing this because you are truly 100% intending to help? Why are you doing this? This ties back to the first question as well. Are you doing this for selfish reasons or selfless reasons? Selfish reasons could be you want to get famous, you want to get the fame, you want to get the acknowledgement of your actions. Is that a positive intention? Is that a pure intention? I can't, you can't say really, right? We can understand that perhaps it's not. Why are you doing this act? Are you acting in front of other people because you want to truly help somebody, or because you want the acknowledgement from the people? Oh, you did a great job, bro. You're a hero. You helped somebody. And I think if we apply this even more daily in our lives, we take a look at how people use perhaps the image of doing something good to benefit themselves. And again, it could be because of popularity. It could be because of riya. I've been learning a lot about the the 40 Hadiths book by Imam Khomeini in a course that I'm taking. And I love this course by Sheikh Jafar here in the Toronto area, because it's so psychologically based and rooted in that. And it's so close to what I've studied as a psych student and a practitioner now. And the Imam talks one of the hadiths looks at envy, it looks at riya, ujub, and all of these things that we're familiar with. And we look at it from a psychological point of view. We can tie it in here. We look at the intent. Why are you doing this? Are you doing this because of riya? You want people to say, oh, look at him. Oh, mashallah, look at this brother, how much he prays. Look at how he prays. He's got that thing on his forehead, he prays and does sajda so much. Meanwhile, he's burning eggplant and putting it on his forehead. Yeah, that's what they do, apparently. Insider information. There's a lot of things like that. People, and I can link this also with abusers in our community, whether it's spiritual leaders, whether it's speakers, whether it's reciters, whether it's men in the community, women too, not just men. But when we link it here, okay, let's link it here. Some of these people, and I've had this discussion with other people when we looked at abuse, domestic violence, and just abuse in general, and narcissism. So amongst the most abusive people out there, and in terms of narcissistic, and when we look at intent here, is they tend to be the most religious and spiritual out there in terms of their actions and showing themselves like that. You're smiling, brother, because it seems like you've come across such characters. We all have. Let's be realer. I think we all have met these people, worked with these people, seen these people. And it only, afterwards you realize how ugly and how dark and how evil they are because of this, right? They show themselves to be so religious and spiritual and so godly and so divine and charity this and doing this and all of that. Meanwhile, they beat their wife and kids at home. What? Like how does the two connect, right? And I speak with such passion about this because I see too much of it in my line of work, whether I work within the community or outside of my community and doing therapy with clients. You see so much of this. And guess what? These people are amongst the first that we know that the Imam, inshallah, when may Allah hasten his reappearance, will cut in half when he first comes back. Because these are the hypocrites, right? So having a better understanding of this, let's look back at this question again. Do you advise someone to proceed in this manner of helping others or to step back to reevaluate? Of course, to step back and reevaluate. What are your intentions here? Are you truly doing this to help? Or are you doing this to show off in the community, to show off in front of people? To show, hey, look at me, I'm special, I am godly, I am divine, I'm religious, I'm spiritual. How many times have we seen this with people when people come to ask, come for marriage? MashaAllah, this brother's so religious, MashaAllah, this sister, da, da, da. Meanwhile, you know underneath what kind of stuff that they've been hiding into the world. Now, everybody has baggage, everybody has history, everybody has done wrong, we're not perfect, we are fallible, and we will make mistakes, and that is normal. Being human is to err, but we strive towards that perfection. And the Imams and the Ahlul Bayt, they have taught us how to work on that with muraqabat an-nafs. One of the lectures I talked about with motivation, we looked at that very we looked at it in depth in terms of how we can work on an issue, something like a behavior that we want to change. And this ties in beautifully here in terms of understanding your nafs and the different parts of the self. So nafs al-mutma'inna, al-lawama, and I always forget one of the three. Help me out, brother. So nafs al-mutma'inna, nafs al-lawama, and nafs al-shaitan. I know it just slipped my mind. Somebody help us out here. In any case, so the three parts of the self, it's at the tip of my tongue. I can't remember. So what you see here is that constant jihad in nafs, right? Battle of the nafs to do good or to do bad. And this is where your intention comes in, where you play with that. And we have that in psychology a lot when we take a look at your intent. right? الأمارة, thank you, عشيدكم. لوامة, الأمارة, والمطمئنة. Thank you so much. So, yes, thank you. They're all saying it now. Bless you all. So the idea again here with intent, if you are not 100% altruistic in your intent to help, right? Then absolutely take a step back. Are you doing this because you want people to look at you a certain way? Right? Because that makes you feel good when people are giving you attention and, you know, oh, yeah, I did that. That was me. You know, that nafs al-ammara right there, that loves that attention, right? Are you doing this to get fame? Are you doing this? Again, reevaluate yourself and go through muraqabat al-nafs, go through that whole cycle of what is your intent, looking and observing that muraqabah, right? And continuing the evaluation of the nafs now, and looking also at when you reach that goal, have you truly, you know, have you truly attained it? Or was it in the outcome in the end that you got it because of the attention, or is it out of sincerity? Like somebody said here, even if your intent isn't 100% sincere, should you still help because it's for the greater good? I can't answer that question. I think it's a very personal question. It comes between you and your value system, you and your morals and your ethics. It's very personal. I cannot answer that. It comes down to you and your value system. Are you doing this for what? And it's interesting, the work I do, because I've been pushing for years now to talk about mental health in the Muslim community, because I see so much suicide. I see so many people impacted in a negative way, being isolated, depressed. Like we were saying earlier, people who are oppressed will take on these characteristics very similar to depression, anxiety, and relation to isolation. And I've been pushing this out in the public, pushing this out there because my intent is to help people. And then I hear the backlash of people saying, oh, she's showing off, she's doing this for fame. And okay, sure. That's your beliefs. If you want to believe that, sure. God gave me a mission. God gave me an ability here. God gave me the passion for this, right? And I'm using it in the best way that I can in terms of how I can support, in terms of bringing awareness around the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, what they have taught us when it comes to values, right? And I think we have to be careful also, because there are public people out there, perhaps, who may not have the best intent with what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And we have to be very critical thinkers. Be critical thinkers. Be aware. Don't jump on the bandwagon of popularity, right? It's so easy to follow the crowd that way, right? So I think this comes back again to looking at how we need to reevaluate ourselves. Take a look at your intentions. Why are you doing this? What have you learned, right? Somebody mentioned something very beautiful here. Sometimes we confuse confidence with show off, or sometimes, yeah, vice versa. And this is where I think you need to have your critical thinking in terms of, I mean, we can never judge a sincerity, someone's sincerity. We can't do that. I think this is something that's very personal. And who is the ultimate judge of that? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In the end, we bring it back to you and your muraqabat an-nafs, your observation of yourself, right? Why do you want to do this? In the end goal, is it materialism or is it akhirah? So I think when we put that in front of us, that can help us reevaluate our intention. And I have to say, I've personally and professionally, when I've been struggling with something that I want to do, whether it's a project, whether it's this or whether it's that, whether it's even posting a post or a picture. And I've learned this along the years from mentors and friends who came back and said, so why do you want to post that picture? You look like you're showing off. Like, why are you doing that? And I come back and say, I'm wearing a abaya. I'm wearing a hijab that I'm proud of, right? And some brothers have grilled me on this, and I grill them back and I say, I am wearing my hijab proudly here. I'm not doing some matching lipstick to your hijab issue here, because again, with fashion issues, fashion hijab and things like that, what I'm doing here is empowering what women should be doing with their hijab, to be proud of it. Yes, it's confidence. I'm not showing off, but I'm confident about my hijab. And we need more women in our communities to proudly show their hijab in a proper way. You can be a professional, you can be a wife, you can be a mother, you can be all of those things including being a professional, including wearing proper hijab, including being somebody that can contribute meaningfully to society, but most importantly, in the direction of Islam taught us by the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. Again, reevaluation of your intent. Whenever I looked at that and I played around with that intent, could it be that? Could it be this? Could it be? And then when you really work that mujahadat an-nafs that we were talking about, I can guarantee you from my personal experience and what I've seen from other people, when you go through that jihad an-nafs, subhanallah, what the outcome is, how Allah rewards you, right? How you feel the blessings of the Ahlul Bayt come towards you, then you know you've done the right thing, right? Sometimes perhaps you may get this reward temporarily. Some people will be like, why them? Why this? Why not me? But we cannot all judge equally like that. Again, we cannot judge at all. In the ultimately ends, only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who can judge us and our intentions. But I put that back onto you with what the question that somebody mentioned there. If you are not sincere in your actions, if you are not 100% sincere in the actions that you are taking, take a step back and reevaluate. Look at what it is that you truly want to be doing, because it can come back and hurt you. Whether in the dunya, if you don't see the negative impact of your insincere intention in the dunya, you're definitely going to see it in the akhirah. From a psychological point of view, just quickly, these things are called karma, right? These things, spiritually rather, but psychologically, these things, your consciousness is going to come back and haunt you. Your consciousness is just going to be coming back over and over and over again. Why did I do that? Did I do the right thing? Right? The id and the superego, the nafs, the different parts of the nafs are fighting each other, right? What is happening there? So I think it's really important to really value the understanding of reevaluating your intentions, because it has so many impacts on you spiritually, psychologically, and on your mental health. Long answer, but inshallah it was thorough.
Of course, no. I before in between our talk, I want to apologize for the internet connection on my end. I think is the problem because it cuts off, and I apologize, sister. I believe in the middle of your answer, you asked me a question, but I was having difficulties understanding the question, so I couldn't get to that. But yes, I picked up this part that this is a personal question, because especially with today's day and age, with the whole issue of hypocrisy, which has always existed in all cultures, especially now with the power of media, it's something that it's not something that you could address from from an outsider. It's always like within a person that's asking the question. So that's a very good that you've pointed that. Yeah.
Especially with social media, and there's studies done on that and discussions done on that in terms of people doing what they're doing. Is it to show off? Is it to just be stupid and silly? Is it just meaningless? There's a lot of meaningless things out there, right? Or even people who are doing good. Why are you showing this good? Is it to show that you are doing good, or are you encouraging and inspiring others to do that? I think we really need to work on that and understand that. And if we take it a step further, when we look at social media and how it impacts young minds and how it encourages people to do things, I'm not going to do it, but I'll just give you a really silly example. You know how people were doing the duck face, the pouting of the duck face, and I'm not going to do it. You know exactly what I'm talking about. For a while, that seemed to be something everybody used to do, including the people in our Muslim communities. It was a trend, right? Trending. Now, what's the trend? I'm not going to do it, but I'll explain it. Where people are putting their tongue to the side, sticking it out and looking and taking pictures and videos. Why? You're following a mindless trend that could have sexual innuendos that is detrimental for your spirit, psychologically and spiritually. You're just following the trend because people are doing it and it looks cool. Like you see all these stupid, I'm sorry to say this word, but really mindless, brainless type of, what do they call, challenges on social media for people to do because they're bored out of their minds, especially during the pandemic right now. There's been an increase in rise of people using social media or the internet usage because of what we're doing, being stuck in the pandemic, right? So I put that back onto people and challenge you. Why are you just following trends? Why? For what reason are you doing that? To fit in, to be accepted, to be cool? But in the end, you're following the crowd, just like what people did back in the day in Yazid's time. They followed the crowd and they left Muslim bin Aqil in Kufa. They followed the crowd. They followed the crowd that was wrong because of the crowd mentality, right? And so if you apply this again to the discussion that we're having overall here today, are you going to be a follower of mindless, brainless stupidity? Okay. Things that are harmful for you spiritually, emotionally, physically? Or are you going to be standing up against things that are harming you, again, with oppression, right? And using your courage, meaning facing your fear because you see something that's more important than your fear, and sacrificing yourself, right? Whether it's sacrificing your time, your energy, or whatever, and it could be your life, is the lessons that we are learning here, in order for that ideal. Again, applying this daily, standing up for silly things like and things, for example, such as bullying, cyberbullying, right? Physical bullying, abuse, and all of these kinds of things. Where are you going to put your voice here for that, right? And we see that a lot in social media, again, where people are not using social media in the right way to help, but rather hurting themselves.
Of course. Continue with our questions because time is also important in this. Following up, we have in your lectures that are out there, you mentioned how much courage or help we give is based on 3 factors: cultural norms and influences. Can you please provide more insights on this? For example, which of these 3 is the strongest reason, and which is the one that we would most often contemplate being courageous? So which of them would make that would mean that it's more courageous from the ones that you've all mentioned before, which are cultural norms and influences?
So this is a very interesting question when we take a look at cultural norms and influences and religious upbringing and socioeconomic status. I wouldn't say there's a specific answer as to which is more, more connected to courage. The way I would answer that is, again, to have a better understanding of these factors. So let's take a look at that. These external factors, like we said, cultural, religious upbringing, socioeconomic status, these can influence our behavior in any way, correct? So when we look at it at courage and altruism, we are more likely to jump to help, like we said, those who are closest to us than strangers in times of these danger, right? When we look at it from a neurological, cultural aspect, these again influence our behavior. When we look at people who are extreme altruists, so to speak, they differ from regular folks who don't behave this way. In their brain, from a neurological aspect, subhanAllah, the amygdala, which is the part of the brain that's involved with emotions, studies have shown that they respond differently to signs of distress than like a regular altruist, subhanAllah. So yes, of course, all of these are going to impact us. So I put this back on to you. Which one does more to impact us? Well, let's look at religion, for example. Some people could be more religiously influenced than others, right? So perhaps their religious beliefs are going to impact them more. Somebody who's grown up in a religious environment, or somebody who's found religion and spirituality, they are more likely to be impacted by their religious beliefs than somebody who, let's say, is motivated by socioeconomic status. If they are more interested in materialism, that will be their motivating factor, right? People have different definitions of what success and happiness is. I learned this along when I was doing career counseling, and I found it fascinating when we looked at people motivating themselves into going to different careers. Are you going into medicine, for example, because of the money, the prestige, the status? Are you going to truly help people? Right? And so the definition in the end, when we look at happiness and success, Does happiness define you being happy and satisfied in giving and helping others, or happiness and success is defined by the big bucks in the bank? Right? So it's a personal motivator here. So there is no cookie cutter, or we cannot paint, as the expression goes, everybody with the same color here with the paintbrush, because it's a very individual motivator, right? An example. Why do you want to go to Ziyarat al-Arba'in? Are you going because it's a holiday? You know, when I first attended my first ziyara, and people were telling me, you know, people are going in groups and cliques, and they've got all this and that, and different ziyara groups. People see it as a vacation. People see it as a festival to have fun and connect with old friends, and food at these fancy hotels, and, you know, looking at men and women. Yeah, it's there. Let's not deny that. I'm saying it as is, right? And when you look at historically, and I remember learning this in my poetry, pre-Islamic and after Islamic poetry and literature in university, we studied this aspect of the pilgrimage, right? Yeah, some go for the food fest. I'll make a comment on that in a second. But when I remember studying the pilgrimage, the historical aspects of it, it was a festival for people to come and check out people, men and women, check out, you know, the goods that people would sell in the stores. And it was not a spiritual journey for people. It's, again, how you choose to view it. And I found it fascinating because we learn Islam from our homes. We learn Islam from our teachers, from our madrasas, you know, that our parents put us in, the Saturday, Sunday schools. We learn Islam from our lectures, what we read and all of that. It was fascinating to learn it at a secular institution from a Christian Lebanese professor talking about pre-Islamic and post-Islamic poetry and literature and discussing pilgrimage. And I was floored because I had this idealistic idea that everything is perfect within the Islamic culture. Now, I didn't say everything's perfect. Everything's perfect in Islam. We know that, but not in the Islamic culture and how people follow it. So this was an eye-opener for me, learning that as a young student. And now looking back at the ziyara, right? When we take a look at this, how are you influenced, okay, when it comes to, let's tie this all back in now, in your act in front of you, in terms of courage here specifically, right? What are the factors that influence you when you're going to pilgrimage? Like when I was studying that, when you're going to ziyara till Arba'in, are you going for the food fest? Are you going for all of these fun things around it? Are you going for saying, I went to ziyara, to showing that off to people? I've been to ziyara 5 times now, Arba'in, and I've done the Sha'baniyah and this and that. Are you saying this to show off that you've done this? Is this an accomplishment? Because, and I've heard, this is not me saying this, but I'll give my opinion. I've heard scholars discuss this, where they say, so people who've gone on so many ziyaras, has their ziyara truly been accepted? What kind of intent did they have going there? And you have people who are from far, perhaps from here, who are not being able to go this year to the ziyara. Perhaps their actual ziyara is accepted than those who are there. I found that so fascinating when I heard scholars talk about that, because again, what is it all about? Your influence here, your intent, when we tie it back to intent, what is your influence to make you end goal here of what your action is going to be? So coming back to courage, what is the biggest influence in your life? I think that's a very personal question in terms of being able to answer that, because it is your motivation. What drives you? What is your goal for happiness and success? What is your intent behind this action? And what are the factors that have influenced you? If you have grown up in a religious, spiritual household and you believe it, and you were taught to love and taught to love your salah, because, you know, a lot of parents perhaps will, and I use this joke frequently when to explain it because it hits the point, is, you know, you have a mom running into the room, opening up the room and saying, wake up, there's a fire. And then like, where? The kids jump up, in Jahannam if you don't get up and pray. The idea here is you're instilling fear in your child. You're not instilling love, right? So when we look at religious upbringing, perhaps if the household has a beautiful love influence on the child growing up, perhaps their influence here to acting courageous could come from that, right? The intent of the spiritual religious aspect. Now we have courage as well, which is interesting. And I'm speaking here from a tribal Iraqi cultural point of view, where culture is a very big thing. And I think a lot of our cultures specifically can connect with that idea, right? There's the warrior type of culture, the tribal, right? And the ashayir, as we say. And a lot of people really connected to this idea because they are fiercely proud of their tribe, right? They're fiercely proud of what they stand for, or what they do, and what it means, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So perhaps culture is more important to you than religion. That can impact you, because if you come from a culture of where it is important for men to behave a certain way or women to behave a certain way, aside from religion and spirituality, perhaps that will impact you as well, right? If you come from that warrior type of culture. So in the end, when it comes to contemplating being courageous with these influences, I think it does come down to closeness, the person that we are helping, because we are more likely to help somebody that is closer to us than a stranger. If somebody is being hurt in front of you, you're probably going to jump to helping that family member than a stranger, perhaps, right? So it truly depends on what is the stronger influence in your life, whether you're religious or culture, or whether money, materialism, if that's a big motivator for you in the end.
Of course, yes. That would also be something to reflect on. So if we have time, we can, I apologize for that. So if you have time, we can continue with the questions, but I think
we have time, brother. We have time. Yeah. The Instagram will go off. We'll come back in. So go ahead, ask that question.
Oh, okay, sure. It might cut off, but hopefully let's see.
It'll give us a 2-minute heads up, so don't worry about that. We'll get back in after. Go ahead.
It says, we live in a society where individuals are judged based on their external influences such as status, socioeconomic status, and education, or even money. So they're seen as most desirable depending on the personality. But whereas being selfless, religious, or courageous are not seen as desirable qualities, or if they are, they're for the movies. It's not realistic in terms of expectations that people have. So how would that fit in with our discussion of altruism in terms of ikhlas, if I use the Arabic word for it?
Very interesting question when we take a look at these desirable qualities, where, like you said, selfless or being religious or courageous, these are not seen as a positive things, right? And when we take a look at, what are the things that we can do to be selfless, and compared to the personalities like Abu Fadl al-Abbas alayhi salam, what lessons that we can take away to help from him and his acts of courage and altruism to help us understand that this is one of the best qualities. Again, if we look back at the last question that we took a look at, again, it has to do with what motivates you, right? What motivates you and your dignity. And your dignity. What do you tell your dignity? If you do not have a sense of honor, right? In the end, some people, like we said, can show off doing certain acts, right, for the sake of whatever their intent is, but it could be very fake at the end of the day. They are not acting with a sense of honor, right? So I think this is a very deep question that summarizes a lot of what we discussed here. And I will answer this question with questions in a way to help ourselves to all to reflect, including myself, is what motivates you? What drives you? What do you want in front of you? We can take a look at, again, your end goal. Your end goal here, is it for materialistic factors, or is it for spiritual factors. In our case, when we talk from an Islamic perspective, al-akhirah, right? So what drives you? What is your motivation? When you look at Abu Fadl al-Abbas and what he experienced for the sake of bringing water back to his niece and the children, my God, the level, I cannot even express, it's hard to express, but you know it motivates you somehow. Like you cannot tell me on the night of the 7th of Muharram, you could not shed a tear or your skin had goosebumps when you listened to the story of Al-Abbas. Like when you hear the word courage, when you hear the word altruism, again, when we're looking at it from a perspective of Muharram, again, it's Abu Fadl al-Abbas that comes to your head, right? The qualities that he exhibited, Assalamu alayka ya Abu Fadl al-Abbas, ahsantum, right? He demonstrated everything that we talked about here and more. And you hear this when scholars talk about it, and I love looking at it from the psychological lens, how when he picked up that water, he got to the water. What did he say when he looked at that water? How can I take you when what's happening to Imam Hussain? He threw it away. Look at that jihad, the nafs right there. That struggle of the self right there. That is the epitome of the mental strength that he had to be able to defeat that lower part of himself that wanted that water, right? That wanted that water but refused to take it. My goodness, what strength did he possess? Do we not kind of pump ourselves up like when we hear about Abu Fadl al-Abbas? And I know there's this cultural image that we have within our communities, all the Shia communities, of manliness and strength. When we talk about Abu Fadl al-Abbas, I would take it a step further and say it's not just the physical strength that we connect with, but it's that beautiful mental strength, the spiritual strength that he had to throw away that water, right? And refuse it. Is that not honor and dignity right there? That is incredible, right? Where he did what he did in those moments, exemplify to us how courage and self-sacrifice in the form of altruism is amongst the most honorable qualities. The most honorable qualities that are unquestionable to this question. When you think of what he did in that moment, that answers your question right there. That is a desirable quality. We all want to be mentally stable, mentally strong. We want to embody these characteristics that we learn from the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam and apply them daily. When you think about Abu Fadl al-Abbas and throwing away that water, sacrifice right there. How would you apply this to your daily life? That is the epitome of being selfless right there as well. When you are faced with a difficult situation and you see perhaps in front of you the materialistic goal of being attained, again, coming back to one of our questions earlier in the discussion, how do you work on that sincerity right there? You don't feel aligned with yourself. Again, if we look at Hurr al-Riyahi, and again, at a loss of words when you look at this personality and what he exemplified, because he showed incredible courage as well, right? When he left that entire army of the thousands because his consciousness, right? Lawama, nafs al-lawama was telling him what you are doing is wrong. What are his eternal words that we learn? I see fire, the fire in front of me of hell, and I see paradise. Right there, right there. He chose courage. He left that materialistic world, which led to the fire, and he chose with courage this path. Does this not show what an incredible, desirable quality courage is? Something, again, to remind ourselves. And also, beautiful reminders when we look at the courage of Hurr al-Riyahi. It was never too late. He was the one that took Imam al-Hussein's camp to where they were led. He was the one that had to block off the water to the women and children in the camp. Look at what he did. You know how we say, oh, it's I've done too much bad, I've done too much evil, Allah can never forgive me, what's the point? That's a lot of self-hate you're putting on. I see a lot of people struggle with that in my line of work. A lot of self-hate, right, that you put on top of yourself. Mentally, we looked at what happens when you are experiencing oppression, but also self-oppression. ظلمت نفسي. We hear that in the beautiful Dua Kumail. ظلمت نفسي. You put a lot of self-oppression there. I'm not going to go into it again, but we talked about how oppression can impact you. That's a lot of self-hate you're putting on you right there. So we need to recognize in those moments of mistakes that we do, and that when we err, that nafs al-lawama that's helping you to get to the path of the nafs al-mutma'inna by fighting through jihad al-nafs. That right there is hurr riyahi. That is courage. It was not too late. No matter what he did, he went and begged for forgiveness. His sons came with him. Some of his people with him came as well and fought with him and stood with him. He was amongst the first to be sacrificed to fight into battle. This shows you what courage is right there, and what a desirable quality that no matter how bad you have done things, no matter how many wrongs you have done, it's never too late. You can ask for forgiveness, and that is courage. You can ask for support and help. That is courage. And I always say this for people who are struggling with mental health issues, right? That no matter how dark it is, no matter how difficult it is, no matter how isolated or depressed or sad you may be, it takes incredible courage to come and ask for support and help when you are feeling so low, when you are feeling at that point of feeling helpless, almost to the point of hopelessness, which is something in our faith that we talk about in terms of never be in the place of despair and hopelessness, because there's always hope. And you see that with the beautiful embodiment of Al-Hur, what he did and what courage it took to go forward, but also how he altruistically sacrificed himself for the cause. He knew he was going to die. How do we learn from that? How do we apply that? How do we see that as a beautiful quality to have in our lives today? That no matter what happens to you in terms of the bad things, no matter what challenges you are in, it's commendable to ask for support. It is commendable to seek help. It is commendable to ask for forgiveness from the Almighty and change your ways back. Courage, we can go on and on and on. Absolutely. There's so much to discuss with this, and to be inspired by this, and to be able to apply this in our daily lives, alhamdulillah. And I think this is a good way to end this part of the discussion in terms of answering it by understanding what motivates you. What is your motivation in this life? When we talk about being a Hussaini, a Zainabi, a Fatimi, a Abbasi, a Hassani, what does it mean when we say that we want to follow the path of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam? There is going to be sacrifice. There is going to be suffering. There is going to be struggles. And these we know when we look at studies around, whether it's psychological, whether it's spiritual and religious, and you'll see tons of books out there, and including, by the way, the book of the 40 Hadiths, we talk about and we discuss that aspect and idea around struggle, around those who are people of faith. You are going to be tested again and again and again. It always comes down to that question of why me? And I see this with my clients all the time. I see this with people who struggle. Why me? Why does this have to happen to me? And my question back is, why not? Why not? This is a struggle you are experiencing, a personal struggle indeed that you are experiencing. But why? Let's lead this now to the last segment, the second part of our discussion. But I just want to make sure to see how much time we have on Instagram. It looks like it's going. So let's keep going now. And we want to look at maybe they've changed it. I don't know. Is it more than an hour now? Okay, regardless of that, if it does cut off, we'll go back into it. That's not a problem. And we wanted to talk about, as we brought earlier, we wanted to talk about this year's ziyarah. Ziyarat al-Arba'in this year, and how it is impacting us in such a way that we have not experienced in our lifetime, meaning the last few years after the government changed in Iraq, because for years and years we have not known what Ziyarat al-Arba'in is to the level of what we've seen today. And I know for those people who, like myself, are unable to go this year because of the pandemic, it has been very heartbreaking. I actually had to pull myself together for this program today because I was in a lot of pain, emotional pain, spiritual pain, and I looked like I was punched in the face, and I sounded incredibly very blocked up because of how much I have been crying the last 2 days. And I think the tears will be coming on soon again for this, because it has been, here we go. It has been incredibly hard for a lot of us this year not to be able to go to the ziyarah. And I know a lot of people around the world, they haven't been able to go at all yet to the Ziyarat al-Arba'in. They've been to other ziyarats or just unable for whatever reason. And I had this discussion the other day with some people in terms of, why is it that some people can go and why others cannot go? Is it because the imam doesn't want them there? Is it because they're not good enough? They're not worthy? They're not that? And I'll answer again from my personal point of view. I don't think it's because of that for those who are sincere and who haven't been able to go yet. It's because you are not ready to go. You have your own reasons that you think that you are ready to go, but perhaps the imam doesn't think you are ready to go, and you need to stay where you are until you are ready to go. Perhaps these are things that we need to recognize when coping with this difficult situation of not being able to go to the ziyarah this year, because it is so easy to get caught up. And I did this last night, to get caught up in pictures, to get caught up in videos, to get caught up in watching the zuwar who are going and the friends that we know who are going, and feel such distress and pain in our hearts and our spirit that this is harming you. This is actually a form of self-harm that can really hurt you because you were so overwhelmed with this sadness and pain. And I think it's important to first of all acknowledge and come to that painful acceptance that it is not our time this year, and there's a reason. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only knows, and that in time our eyes will see what is written on our foreheads, meaning we will see the wisdom behind why we cannot go this year. First and foremost, with the world pandemic that is happening, perhaps it is not safe for you to go. Perhaps you coming back could have some asymptomatic symptoms that could impact other people around you. Perhaps leaving work can impact your work, etc., etc. The list goes on. We can justify and validate in our minds to help us kind of work through that so that we're not feeling as much pain, right? Another thing is perhaps you are meant to stay here where you are to do the work of the message of Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam. Perhaps you are meant for that as well. Meaning, perhaps you need to be doing awareness in your community about Imam al-Hussain, such as through Who is Hussain initiatives, right? Bringing more awareness. Because of the fire in your heart that is burning, that you cannot go, use that, redirect that energy. I talk a lot about redirection in my line of work. When you have something that's happening to you and it is a negative thing, this difficulty, this problem, reframe it to an opportunity. This energy and fire in your heart, reframe it to an opportunity. Of what? Of what? So many beautiful things. In the case of Imam al-Hussain, awareness within your communities. Perhaps learn more about the ziyarah. And I wanted to share a few resources that I have. So there is this book here called Hidayat al-Za'irin by Abdul Kadhim Shayan Mashkuri rather, okay? So this is a book from Ziyarat in Iran, not in Iraq. It talks about all of the holy places that Iran and the history, their spirituality, who the people are and the reason. The brother is also going to be coming out with a book on the ziyarah in Iraq as well as in Syria and other holy places. And the idea behind this, okay, is that opportunity of us not going is to learn more about the ziyarah. How many of us just go blindly because we're following the crowd of what the ziyarah is supposed to be, and you don't know anything or know any history other than this is where Imam Hussain is buried, this is where Al-Abbas is, and this is the Talla Zainabiyya, or this is where Imam Ali is. How much do we really know about these holy sites, the history, how over time, again and again and again, the enemies of the Ahlul Bayt have destroyed these holy sites, right? If you look at the book by Sheikh Muhammad al-Hilli on al-Baqi', he gifted me this book, and it was one of my favorite books up to date because it goes into the detail of the historical destruction of these sites and how we are dying for this and praying for this and doing so much work and lobbying to rebuild the Baqi', right? Yes, do we know the history of these holy places in Iraq and Iran and elsewhere? This is the opportunity right now to learn more and more about that, inshallah. By the way, if you follow the page, the Picky Za'ir, and that's an interesting name of the group, the brother who wrote this book, that's the page, Picky Za'ir. I'll write it out here so you can see it. And the idea here, again, is to have that self-awareness and knowledge. Because when you go with that, because we know in the ziyarah, the ma'rifah, the word ma'rifah, are you going with that awareness in the ziyarah? Or are you going because it's a vacation and, you know, you're just hanging out with people and all of that, right? So you want to be aware of what it is. And I think I did not spell that correctly. Let me do that again. It's called the Picky Za'ir. So if you go on that Instagram page, you will see, mashallah, so much historical facts about places that we didn't really know about. I wrote pick. I'm sorry, the Y is not coming out. In any case, you understand what I'm trying to say. The Picky Za'ir. Check it out. Now, another thing I'd like to bring attention to is how we can cope with not going to the actual ziyarah this year. And I'm actually quite surprised I'm not very emotional anymore. And I think this is because this is how science and psychology works. When you redirect your energy in a positive way, in a productive way, in a constructive way, you're not going to fall to just emotions. You're regulating your emotions in a healthy manner, in a productive manner. Okay, so I think this is why I'm not bawling my eyes out right now, because I was right before the program. So this is another book that I highly recommend to check out. Are you familiar with this one? Kamil al-Ziyarat. Okay, Kamil al-Ziyarat by Ibn Qulaywa, I'm not pronouncing this right, Qulawaha al-Qummi. Okay, and I've browsed through this book, I've read through this book here and there, and it's a wonderful book where it talks about all of the important benefits of the ziyarah, okay? And I actually won this book a few years ago at a banquet we had here in Ottawa called the Ziyarah Banquet. And I didn't win the ziyarah trip, but I won this book. I already knew I was going to ziyarah, so I was fine, alhamdulillah. And so one of the sisters, when I won this book, she came up to me and said, "Can I please take this book from you?" I'm like, "Take it." And she borrowed it for a few months, and she came back weeping when she gave back to me and said, "You have to read this cover to cover. There's so many different blessings in this book that can help you to talk about." So for example, chapter 6, it looks at the rewards and the merits of going to the mosques and the graves in Medina. So again, this is creating that knowledge and ma'rifah. Wouldn't you love to go to ziyarah next year, having this knowledge and just this more fire in your heart, knowing about all of these places, right? So this is a highly recommended book that I recommend to help right now to cope as a healthy way of understanding more about the ziyarah, to help you mentally so you're not in that place of constant despair of not being able to go to the ziyarah this year. Another book here, quickly, because we're going to wrap up in a few minutes, inshallah. The page on Insta, it's called Picky Za'ir. Picky Za'ir. Okay, so this is what was that? Yeah, go ahead. Thank you. Again, when we talk about ma'rifah, knowledge here, and deep knowledge of history, a lot of people don't understand or know the history. And I'm not saying I do, I'm still learning, but I'm sharing the things that I've been learning along as well. Is a lot of people don't know the history of what happened in Karbala, what led up to it, what happened after? What happened after the 13th day of Karbala, of Ashu, of Muharram rather, right? What happened after? This is the opportunity of the time to educate yourself. Why are you crying? Why are you doing latam? Are you just following the crowd because of the crowd mentality and you're influenced by what you see? No, this is time to learn more about it. So this is another book. It's really poorly translated. And I'm sure there are even better books out there. This is the one I have at home that I turn to for history because it's quite detailed. So it's called Imam Hussain and Tragic Saga of Karbala by Nasiri Munfarid, translated by Ali Ibrahimi. Bless you, brother Ali Ibrahimi, for the translation. And this book starts from looking at the saga from the beginning, meaning the time, the birth of the Imam, to after and the revolution of Al-Mukhtar and everything in between. And I think we really need to understand what is Ziyarat Arba'in, right? Especially when it comes to Lady Zainab and the Sabaya and leading up to the day of Arba'in, what these women went through, how they were captured and chained and taken from place to place to place, and why all of these villages and cities have these maqams from where some of the women and children that passed away and died there, like we know in Al-Sham, right? Sayyidah Ruqayya is buried there. Or in Baalbek, where there's a stop where the household of the Prophet was there. So tracing the footsteps of Imam al-Hussein from before Karbala to after Arba'in and beyond. This is the opportunity for us right now, for those of us who are not going on to ziyarah, and while we're feeling this sadness, redirect it to learn more about the history of what took place. Understand why you want to go to that ziyarah. Right? Mentally, that will give you so much strength. And I think it's a great coping strategy. Now, a few more before we finish up. And alhamdulillah, I'm so glad I'm not bursting into tears like I was earlier. One of my favorite books, and I'm personally attached to this book because I know the brother is a good dear friend, and I had the opportunity to work. Okay, I wouldn't say work; it was on the spot kind of thing, but I did end up taking photographs with him on his beautiful cameras, and I did end up watching him and learning from him on the walk when he was taking pictures for this book. Okay, and so I'll bring it up close. For those of you who are not going to ziyarah this year, order this book. You are supporting our local artists and our local creative people and photographers and writers, but also our businesses. So this book is called Arba'in, A Lens into a Sacred Journey by brother Ayaz Ali and the poet and her poetry in there, Sara Bukhari. So you see that there, both places. Okay, I know it's twisted on Instagram, but please, if for those of you who are aching to go, this is an incredible book to have. Okay, an incredible book to have. Yes, I have the autograph as well. And it gets into the details and the beautiful, beautiful pictures, the poetry, the history, spiritual rebirth, najaf. It goes through the entire journey. So instead of feeling the pain of not going, put it into something like this. You are supporting our local businesses and our community members, but for you to go through this and observe and watch as though you were actually on the walk and capturing these beautiful images. Now, last night on Instagram, I posted about the coffee man. For me, he is the epitome of what ziyarah, the generosity of ziyarah is all about. I'm going to find him here and show you. But I posted on my Instagram the videos, and inshallah I'll make a post about that because it impacted me so deeply. And I think this is what set off for me last night personally, and for a lot of those people who are in pain of not going, when I was reliving the moments of being there and not being able to go. And it can be incredibly painful to go through that, and we don't want to go through the pain of it, but perhaps reliving it in a healthy way. So this is the famous coffee man from Abd Ali Zuhairi. I think that's the name, from Najaf. And they offer coffee to the Zawars. So I encourage you to go on my Instagram story to learn more about this gentleman and how he epitomizes the generosity of Arba'in and his mokib, which offers the Zawar not your Starbucks coffee, of course. A very, very special way of doing coffee. And if you watch the video of how he gives and he doesn't keep anybody waiting, and how he's honored to show his family, has honored to show the mokib how much pride and love he has in the service of Abu Abdullah al-Hussain. Right there. Right there. That service. Al-Khidmah. I think this is why a lot of us are hurting this year, because we cannot do the khidmah the way that we want to. The way that we want to. But perhaps we can do the khidmah in the way that we are meant to do it. The way that we have to do it because we are stuck here. Right? So we need to reframe that. We need to reframe that. Last but not least, part of a very important initiative to my heart that for years now I have been talking to different centers and almost berating the centers that use styrofoam and plastic and all of that. And it was even before I went to Ziyarat al-Arba'een that it was an eye-opener for me to see. And I know for those of you, my brothers and sisters who've been to Ziyarah, right? Where, yes, sorry, the book is in English. All of these books I showed are in English and some are translations. So for those of you who've been to Ziyarah, have you not seen the environmental disaster that is left behind on the walk? You know what I'm talking about, right? I'm talking about the plastic and the waste of food and the water bottles that are just thrown along the way. Is this part of our akhlaq? Is this part of our behavior as Muslims to be that wasteful and not taking care of our environment? Allahu Akbar. It is not. It is not. It is far the opposite. Have you been to Wadi Salam, brother? Have you been there?
I haven't been, no. I haven't had the tawfiq.
Inshallah, you get to go. And inshallah, you will see it plastic free. But for those of you who have been to Ziyarat, to Wadi Salam, it is a graveyard that is just filled with plastic and garbage. And it is a desecration and a disrespect to the graves. But when you look at the walk from Najaf to Karbala, people are just wasting and throwing. And it has a huge environmental impact, a negative one. Alhamdulillah, there are like-minded people around the world, okay, who are very passionate about this topic of having environmentally safe products out there to helping. And this new group that I'm a part of is called the Green Pilgrim, Al-Za'ir Al-Akhdar in Arabic. Was put together by a sister from Pakistan, Sister Zahra Ali, who, as we speak right now, please pray for her safe arrival, is on her way to Ziyarah right now. From Pakistan, she was blessed with an unexpected visa to go as a representative of the Green Pilgrim to go on the Ziyarah and in talks with the Ataba, because this is an initiative supported by the Ataba in Najaf, Ataba al-Alawiyya, al-Husayniyya, wal-Abbasiyya, the Green Pilgrim, just so you're aware. So you can follow the page on Facebook and Instagram, and I'm quickly going to wrap up here. And what we are trying to do is bring awareness. And as the ambassador for the Green Pilgrim in Canada, I'd like to bring your attention and awareness to this. For those who have not left for Ziyarah yet and who are going, please take products like this with you. Okay? What this is a reusable box. Okay? And we have our logo on it, the Green Pilgrim, because we are very proud and we are trying to encourage people. And a few months ago, before Corona hit really hard, I actually bought, and people supported and sent money for me to buy this for people so we can send and give to people to use on Arba'een Ziyarah, because I had my box ready to go. And I was in fear of Arba'een not happening, and sure enough, it didn't. However, one of our brothers, Brother Muntadar from Ottawa, who's on Imam Hussain TV, 3TV, he's journaling. I gave him a box, my daughter and I, before he left, and he is actually journaling this along in his walk and the Ziyarah, and to bring more awareness. So my brothers and sisters, please, for those of you who will be going to Ziyarah, inshallah, please pack with you these types of products, okay? You want to take your own water. By the way, this has been to Ziyarah 3 times. This one. This has been to Ziyarah to Iran and to Iraq, and I love this mug, and it's been to these Ziyarahs, and I use it again and again. Do not resort to plastic. Use something like that for both your water and that. Use things like that for your qima, for your harissa, for your soup that they give you. Go up to the mokib, instead of taking what they offer you, go up with these like this, because we also want to educate the locals there not to give out in plastic. If you are, use biodegradable products. There are sugarcane type of spoons and cutlery that you can use that can fall apart in the environment. One of my friends who owns a restaurant here in Ottawa called Greens and Beans, Sister Krista, mashallah, not only do they do vegetarian halal food and whatnot, they also use biodegradable products such as sugarcane. Sure, it can cost a little bit more. However, this becomes incredibly important for our environment. People who are going to ziyara, please use these types of product. This is a collapsible reusable box. Look at this. How simple, you know, when you go up to, when they give you rice and qima, you can put it in here. All right. Cover it up and you've got your spoon and fork. Look at that. And you can use
Where can they order from?
If you want, I have 100 boxes sitting here. I will be more than happy to send it to you. Message me privately. Ask for it. This I can only say for locals in Canada, right? I don't know what it's like in the US, but for locals. But I'll tell you where I found these if you want to get it yourself. Dollarama. I went out, bought them out. I bought them out in all of the stores. And when I showed this on social media, people started sending me money to buy for them on their behalf. I'm like, well, wait, I want to buy. I want to get thawab too. They're like, no, we're going to pay for it. You just go get it. And then you deliver it to people. So people who want this, if you want it with the Green Pilgrim logo, private message me after. Okay. And I will send this to you. Now, my friends and family in London, what can I say? Inshallah, on my next trip to London, I'll have a few of them for those who want it. So you message me and I'll keep your name. If I come to London, inshallah, and when this pandemic lifts, you can meet with me and I will have your box and your name on it, inshallah. Those who still want to get it without the Green Pilgrim, just go to Dollarama in Canada. You can find it there. So last but not least, I encourage you, please follow the Green Pilgrim page on social media, both Instagram and on Facebook. We are showing videos. We are showing the use of these along the walk. Sister Zahra Ali, inshallah, will arrive soon, and she is documenting her step-by-step to show how to be green and show also, inshallah. And here's another thing quickly. You know how we talked about what are the reasons why we're staying? Perhaps Karbala also needs a little bit of a break from the human traffic that has been experiencing. In terms of the waste, absolutely. Perhaps this is an opportunity for us to redirect, re-strategize, to plan large level, at the level of the ataba, at the level of those of you who are working in environmental engineering, who are environmentalists, who are socially active. And we have people who are slowly joining this movement, people who are very passionate and educated in this movement, to be able to give this khidmah to the Imam. Does the land of the Holy Lands not deserve to be clean, tahir, and pure? So this is a beautiful initiative that we can all take a part of now, while those of us who are not going, to work on that. Instead of feeling sad and frustrated, redirect your energy. Perhaps you can cook in your centers and get shelters. We're actually going to be doing that next weekend. Inshallah, you guys can follow along with who is Hussain, with the Green Pilgrim and the Allah. We will be cooking for a local women's shelter in honor of the abused women of Karbala, Lady Zainab and the Sabaya, to a homeless shelter for abused women and children. This is how the ripples grow in our community. This is how we make an impact, a Hussaini impact here in our countries for those of us who are not going to ziyarah. Redirect your energy of you going there here. Make the waves ripple more and more. Whether it is supporting our businesses, our artists like this, whether it is the Green Pilgrim, whether it is who is Hussain, whether it is whatever organization you are part of, don't just sit home and cry. Don't just sit home and feel sorry for yourself. Don't sit home and say, why did the Imam not invite me? Have I done something wrong? No, you have not. These are the world circumstances right now. This is what is happening right now. Take advantage of this to reflect, like we showed you with these books and resources, to grow your mental strength, okay? Grow yourself with knowledge. Support these initiatives that have to do with reviving and keeping the message of Imam al-Hussain alive. Use your courage, use your time. This is where, again, courage and altruism comes in. Overcome your fear for something that is greater and giving this message out, inshallah. Forgive me. I know I have spoken quite a bit, but I am very passionate about this, and especially because I am not going this year. And inshallah, we can go soon. And as a gift to my fellow brothers and sisters, especially those who are not going, I'd like you to stay tuned for a very important project that we're working on, inshallah, about mental health, about spirituality, about wellness, and ziyarat al-arba'in. Inshallah, Arba'in this year will be releasing a documentary on that topic, the pilgrimage of Arba'in and its impact on our mental health and our well-being. And because we are not going this year, we are dying for these images and visions. And inshallah, this, inshallah, again, a service to our community. So please, du'as for that. Inshallah, we can continue to be in the service of Abu Abdullah al-Hussain in any way that we can, especially during the pandemic.
Inshallah, inshallah. Thank you, Sister Berak. That was today was definitely a very fruitful discussion. I myself feel like I've learned a lot. I'm sure everyone else at home has as well.
Inshallah, ya Rab.
Inshallah, inshallah. So if there's no more questions, we are going to be wrapping this event up. Thanks everyone for joining. Please subscribe to our pages on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram under the same name of Imam Mahdi Youth. And also, please feel free to message Sister Berak for the Green Initiative lunch boxes. Hopefully, she can grow that business as well.
One more thing. Sorry, brother. I have to commend the group, the Imam Mahdi Youth. MashaAllah. An amazing group of youth that are so passionate and are hard workers in the name of the Imam, Ajalallahu Ta'ala Farajul Sharif, who put this event together and back and forth. And I've worked with you guys before in events and inshallah more in the future. So I have to give a huge commending you for all your efforts. And one more project, sorry, quickly, I forgot, because all of you can benefit from Barakat. We're collecting money for the orphans and widows in Najaf. If you are interested in sending money, I'm sending it before the banks close because Arba'in, they shut down everything. You can DM me and inshallah we can send that. So for all of you to get benefits as well. Thank you so much, brother, for your patience.
Thank you, sister. No, thank you for taking time off your Saturday. It's the weekend and enlightening us with a good discussion today.
مأجورين إن شاء الله. تقبل الله أعمالكم إن شاء الله.
Inshallah, inshallah. So stay safe, everyone, and inshallah have a great rest of the weekend. And till our next event, please stay tuned and Khuda Hafiz, inshallah.
Follow their pages so that you can stay tuned with what they're up to, inshallah.
Follow our pages and Sister Berak's page, inshallah, so you'd be updated with the next events we have. Inshallah.
Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum. I'm going to end the Instagram now. Salam.
Khuda Hafiz.